everyone. Welcome to this event. Welcome to the first session of the day. My name is Amrita. I support the marketing team at Superside. And it's this very team that put this sick event together. I'm super excited. Today we're doing something a little spicy. So we don't normally do this, but we wanted to insert this slightly, let's just call it a challenger session to kick off the day. What does that mean? Basically, we're not, shy of disrupting the status quo, talking about the tough things. And so this first session is about why and perhaps when to cut your creative agency. So, and what you might be thinking is, well, isn't that like a touchy subject? And what is a creative agency anyway? So we've got three experts here to talk us through that. So let me quickly introduce them. First, we've got Anisha, who is the director of paid at Articulate. She has a career in analytics and she's been at it for 5 years. She's already a director, already slaying it, which is great. Next, we've got Tyler McLaughlin. He is the director of brand marketing at Mito, also out of California, same as Anisha. And then we've got a longtime Superside friend, Amir, who used to be at Shopify, a longtime customer of ours, and has now moved on to work in the crypto space, which is really great. And what I know about Amir, because I've known him for a long time, is that he has lots of thoughts on testing, iteration, truly unlocking growth through sort of like, really like creating a bit of chaos. We talk a lot about chaos theory when we meet for drinks. So welcome back to Superside's virtual summit, Amir. So welcome everybody. I think, there's tons of discussion to be had. And I just want to say to everyone that's listening, we have never met before, except Amir and I, of course. And we have never discussed this topic at all. Like we've really just never done a dry run or anything like that. So what you're going to be hearing live is just like unfettered thoughts, not scripted in any way. So fingers crossed, I hope we don't butcher this, but let's get into it. I guess I'll just start with the first most explosive question, two-part question. What is a creative agency to all of you? And what are parts that work for what are parts in your mind that work for some businesses and that don't? Anyone?
I can start.
Sure.
Well, what is creative agency? I think really depends on what you want to get out of a creative agencies, because, from creative agencies perspective, they have the creative talent that they outsource. But from you really got to figure out what you want before even engaging with them. And I think that's where a lot of the success we had with Superside came in, is that we did a lot of pre-work to really figure out what do we want to get from Superside, which part of the creative process we want to be responsible for, which parts of it we want to outsource. And for us, it was very clear that we have a lot of work to do with ideation, coming up with the landscape of experiments we want to do. But then there was a lot of work in terms of execution and variation creation that we were like, that's the thing we have to find a partner to kind of take care of. So by the time we came to Superside, we had a good package of here's the assets, here's the direction, and here's like 5 or 6 initial things we want to do. And that was actually pretty helpful to separate out what we want out of a creative agency.
So your definition of a creative agency is actually quite flexible. It's like really any partner that is a creative partner, and it could
be with any piece of the creative process. Because sometimes we have used Supersize just to do ideation. We are like, this is the concept, but come up with like 5 different executions that we can't even think of. We have kind of tapped into our agencies in different parts of the process, but I don't think we have ever done it like from zero to the end. It's usually for a very specific problem area within the process, whether it's production or ideation or execution of an idea.
Gotcha. Cool. Tyler, Anisha?
Yeah, in my experience, creative agency, typically for larger projects, when you do a brand redesign, a whole new website or whatnot, you spend a lot of time doing RFPs and pulling together some creative strategic discussions. But down to the Superside model, where it's providing the ongoing support that's there as well. It's not just for those large projects, it's actually to bring together the ongoing assets that will support that strategic work that was put together.
Yeah, and I think for me, a creative agency is an arm of my team. They are somebody that, or a group of people, or somebody on the agency that can actually be doing the creative work while also working directly with us to actually learn, iterate, and create something that is meaningful for our product. And I guess what I was looking for and what I search for in a creative agency is actually the ability to buy into the product that we're selling and not just be this kind of like black box of weird ideas. It has to be not only the weird ideas and the fun kind of iterative, innovative aspect, but also has to meet the business ideas and the product necessities.
Cool. Yeah, this makes so much sense. Like you run paid, Tyler runs brand, Amir, you run growth, which kind of straddles both of them. So this is, yeah, there's like some slight variation in your answer. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, just like transparently, like, I guess like when I first started at Superside 4 years ago, and we were trying to figure out, what the hell is this thing? What do we want to be when we grow up? And I did a lot of discovery around what are the things that are broken with today's models and what are people and, startups, scale ups, enterprise companies looking for. The one thing that I kept coming back to, or at least, I mean, this is like the output of my discussions with various people. And it's like, I just realized that so many people were constraining almost like in some ways like their creativity or restrained. They were restrained by a contract. Their creativity was restrained by a contract, and they were locked into these like slightly inflexible models that often traditional agencies, creative agencies operate with. Any thoughts on that from now or past lives that you've seen?
One thing that happened is like when we wanted to scale the production, we were bringing Superside, but also a lot of specialized software to help us scale the creative production. And usually with normal agencies, they don't have in their mandate to come and learn a lot of your processes and weird tools that you use, and then kind of do their work through those, especially if the work actually means they end up doing less work themselves. So we were like, we have bought this software that you just need to create the concept and then it will create the variations. So we don't actually need you to create the variations. So that was a huge thing, because at the end of the day, we want to create our system and then plug everyone in rather than buy into an agency's model of this is the way we do things. Because then you're kind of solving a problem for them rather than yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll agree on that and say that it feels like classic agency model is very siloed in their own. They believe that they know what they're going to do, and like Amir said, they want you to kind of fall in line with their plan rather than work themselves into what you've got going on. From in my experience, like timelines were something that was always, we would have a rush. We were like, we need to do this, we need this now, and they'd be like, well, it's going to take us some time. We got to get the resources put together for this. And output is important when you're trying to deliver on creative assets. So,
yeah, and to add to all those constraints is also approvals and that iterative process with internal stakeholders. Classic agencies don't have the ability to do multiple iterations or to make changes where the product or where the team needs. So having a model that allowed for multiple iterations really did change the game.
Why do you think that is with the iteration? Like you would think that particularly with paid where like speed and iteration is the name of the game, like of course you're going to iterate on something that performed well on Facebook, right? Like that's the whole magic in it. Why do you think that doesn't exist in the typical agency model?
I mean, the contracts, it makes a ton of sense. If you're working on a fixed contract and you are looking to get to one end, which is one deliverable or one campaign, you're not going to do more than what is contracted. And I think that sort of contracting does create not only creative constraints, but also in-market constraints that won't allow for a scale of a business.
My brain is exploding right now. That's so well articulated. Thank you. I guess if you had to give advice to this audience, so I know some of you kind of made the decision of which way to go as you were evaluating different options. Can either of you tell stories of what your evaluation criteria was, how you thought about the world to solve your specific problems, and really, like, what is the landscape that you looked at? Like, did you look at freelancers? Did you look at agencies? Did you look at Superside, like a design subscription service? Did you look at other options such as hiring on your team? Like, why not hire on the team? If you guys could tell some stories about that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So with Articulate, we have a incredible design team that just is strapped for resources. And that is not due to our company or anything like that. It is just the sheer amount of volume that I personally need from paid and the amount of learning that we are doing on paid, where we need to change out a piece of copy every 6 days, or we need to change out the color of a background every 5 days. And it's not something that I want our creative team to have to focus on, but I do want a creative team to focus on this that is specifically focused on the paid aspect. So we were evaluating the concept of freelancers and then also Superside in this in order to ensure that we found a partner that would work really well with our amazing creative team and with our brand, and that would be focused on the product, as well as have that paid iterative eye, that they could just create new ideas that we can throw into paid and test out small changes to create large long-term returns. And with Superside and the model that y'all currently have, it is flexible, it is responsive, and it is able to adapt to the current marketplace, where if I don't need anything for a month, great. But if I'm going to go ahead and ramp up LinkedIn, I can get 12 assets in 10 days.
Yeah, I'll build off of that and say that for me, the most important thing was output timeline. Going back to my comment earlier about with a classic creative agency and having to have lots of onboarding calls and strategic discussions, it can be many weeks before you can get anything actually delivered. And when I joined the team, and we, similar to what Anisha said, we were strapped and needed to have stuff happening. We just didn't have the resources internally. And Superside's model was, we have one onboarding call and then we'll start delivering assets for you. And so that was super important. The level of flexibility also of the resources. You mentioned hiring, and we did have those discussions. Is this someone we want to hire a full-time role? Do we want to look at contractors to come in? How do we want to do this? And we, looking at the workload, there was stuff that needed to get done and delivered on, but it wasn't so large that we needed to hire a full-time creative director and a senior graphic designer and a junior graphic designer to kind of handle those different levels of the work. But we needed access to each of those levels of expertise. We needed to have someone that we could hop on a call with and have a creative strategic discussion about, we're changing a website design element, or we want to adjust certain brands' characteristics to identify more with our business model, with direction we're heading in. And you need someone who has senior level experience for that. But at the same time, we need PowerPoints edited. We need, like Anisha said, a copy swapped out on something or colors adjusted. And, a senior creative director is not necessarily going to want to do that in their day-to-day. So we didn't have the internal resources to be able to hire all of those roles. We also just didn't have the workload. As Anisha also mentioned, it's great that we have quiet times throughout the year. For us, it's always summer. We work with a large portion of our offices in Europe, and Europeans love taking vacation during the summer. Maybe in America one day we'll have that too. So things get kind of quiet, and to be paying a retainer model, I'm not going to send busy work to an agency I'm paying $20,000 a month to just to stay like, we did something this month. So it's nice to have a rollover model where quiet months are fine, and we know that those hours will be there for us when we do ramp up and have a large campaign that needs to go live.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, you touched on a lot of points. The idea of being always on, but then also being able to, it's not like if you don't use it, you lose it. You can actually like carry that forward. And then you talked about the breadth of skills that are needed to, bring something to life. I'll just echo what you said, Tyler. when I first started at Superside, I got on a Superside plan for like marketing because we needed a ton of video stuff, but I didn't want to hire like a video guy. Actually, there's no such thing as a video guy anyway. It's like no one can edit, shoot, be on camera. Like there's no such talent. Well, there's one person I know actually who happens to be on our team. But other than that, it's really, really hard to kind of find that unicorn. And like, what are you going to do? Like hire 3 video people to, get like stuff out the door. And so it just made a lot of sense to contract that out. So the breadth of skills part, I totally hear you on. It seems like an interesting recurring theme about this like idea of like everyone's like always strapped. It's so funny how that happens. And I was chatting with another customer a while ago, and she actually said something interesting to me. And I wonder if you guys would agree or disagree, or if there's maybe other reasons. But it's almost like the internal client of a creative team is often marketing, sometimes product, but often marketing. The bulk of it, I would say, is marketing. And marketing's always like going like this, like it's always like growing, lots of demand, scope is increasing, and design's like always like trying to like always catch up. And I think like that weird dynamic is like basically the reason for why they're always strapped for time, always like no matter how much they hire, no matter how many people they have on the team, how many agencies or contractors or freelancers they have, they're always like in this like weird catch-up mode. Would you say that's the core reason? Are there other reasons why they're always strapped for time? I mean, there's tons of creatives on this call, so I'd be curious in the chat as well.
One thing I think is like the better you do, especially when on the paid side with the creative, the more creative you need, because then you're expanding to new markets, you're running more tests, you have more budget. So part of the success that a good agency or a creative partner brings is more workload for themselves. And usually internally, it's very hard to scale that because you just got to hire more and more people. And at some point, you got to figure out a new way to produce stuff because you can't scale it with people. The other one is like, I think they're strapped for resources because depending on, if your creative team is not focused on just creating the type of creatives that you want, then it's kind of a mess of a team, because one day they're designing a billboard, which needs a lot of time to make one iteration, and then versus what you need, which is, I don't know what's going to work. You don't know what's going to work. Come up with like a bunch of ideas so we can run them. And for that, you need a different mindset when it goes to production. So how much effort they put, how systematically they go about producing it versus like a one-off campaign. They will end up being strapped for resources, especially if they try to kind of apply the same thing across these different types of work. So I think that's why it's good to have a specialized team that works only for your use case of creative, because then they can build tooling, processes, thinking the way they want to use it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Actually what we've done on our marketing team is that our creative team has like number of people on it, but we've aligned 2 or 3 people and made these like pods with parts of marketing. So we've got like a paid pod, right? So there's like 3 or 4 people from the creative team, and of course the full performance team, right? Then we've got a couple of people from the creative team and like the social media, like the organic, we're trying to crack TikTok and YouTube, right? So that requires a certain skill set, certain cadence of video. So that's like that pod that we've made. And similarly, we've done it for other parts of marketing as well, community building, brand, so on and so forth. That's actually helped a lot because yeah, sure, you can share those resources and steal people across each, but I'm going to start my week. I've got whatever, 50 hours or what have you, right? And like the bulk of it, 80% of that's going to go to this type of work. And I'm geared up for that. And I've got flexibility on the side. So, my boss always says, you got to plan for growth, right? Like if your experiments are successful, like that's a good problem, but it's going to be a problem. So you got to plan for that growth. You want your experiments to succeed. You got to find ways to kind of keep up with that growth. Diana is telling me we've got tons of questions coming in. So I'm just going to start, since we have like 7 minutes, we're going to start asking some. Top of the list is a question from Seth Subramaliangam. He's asking, what is the impact of ChatGPT, Midjourney, those kinds of things to creative agencies?
I can take that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that if you're selling a B2B product and you're selling a niche product and you want your product to be successful, you have to have great writers on your team that are highly equipped to speak to your product, speak to your audience, and that are able to actually communicate with your audience and bring that back. AI doesn't do that.
Bam. Okay.
I think I'm really sick of me sending her my Mid-Journey outputs, but I'm super excited about it because I think it's a great tool to, one, again, for ideation and coming up with different concepts. Same with ChatGPT. I think a lot of that is like one of the biggest values you can get, even if you don't end up actually using what they give you, because you might need something very specific or you still have to tweak it, which is fine, is just generating a wider set of ideas that you wouldn't normally be in, especially when you're succeeding with your experiments or you try to kind of replicate what worked in the past, and your scope of ideation and creativity gets narrower. And I think the baseline thing anybody can use with these is just have a wider scope of ideas.
Yeah. I mean, at Superside, we've embraced it, right? Like for us, like we want to pass on any time savings to the customer. So when we're creating mood boards, when we're creating ideas, sometimes it's like not worth, like before you develop an idea fully, let's say it's for, you know, whatever, it's for YouTube or it's like some new brand exploration that you're doing. You know, it's just so much faster to do something rough with like a Mid-Journey or what have you, and then put that in front of your customer or your users and see like where it goes. Look at some, you know, maybe you can run, if it's a really big deal, like let's say you're Coca-Cola launching vitamin water in Brazil, maybe you can do focus groups or whatever, you know, through those very early sets of ideas and then develop the larger idea. So that there's like some time and cost savings through that. It's not at the stage, I think, like Anisha and many of you've mentioned, that it's going to overtake your entire creative agency process and ideation process. So I don't think it's like a threat in that way, if that's what Seth was asking. But, you know, it's a tool just like anything else, and, you know, everyone should embrace it. Oh my God, the questions keep coming in. I'm just like running through. Tara Boland is asking, what kinds of teams should consider design subscriptions and which shouldn't? I can take that really quickly and pass it off. I think if you're a team that has a regular cadence of creative and design output and it's somewhat roadmapped, like maybe it's not like roadmap to the T, but you know, there's like a steady volume and velocity of creative that's needed to infuse your various campaigns and programs, that's a great candidate for a design subscription. And if you don't have that steady cadence and it's just like a once in a while kind of thing, then you should work with a freelancer or two. That's at least my 2 cents. I don't know if anyone else has anything to say.
I'll build off of that and say, play a little devil's advocate and say, to an extent, yes. Obviously, if you're going to go over like 6 months without any sort of work, then yes, freelancer. But as I mentioned before, for us internally, we have like it all kind of ebbs and flows, and we have periods of high output and periods of low output. In a subscription model where, again, that rollover happens, and you know, you always have this resource in your back corner, you can always pull on them when you need them, but you don't feel guilty when you're paying those invoices and you're not using it, because you know that eventually you will be able to use it. So no, that was for us, that was really a big piece of it.
Yeah, cool. There's a few questions that don't really pertain to this topic. So Alexa, Chloe, Jamie, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip this. Abby, sorry. Liz Eckstein is asking, as a marketer, what do you look for in a creative partner? Also, what's the first part of the creative process that you cull when budgets are tight?
Interesting.
I'll say the main thing I'm looking for is someone who I can trust to take over, where a single discussion can be had about what's needed, and then I can trust that they're going to deliver it without hand-holding. You know, as we've all mentioned, resources are always strapped. We don't necessarily have the time to be having 5-6 revisions of anything and lots of back and forth. And specifically when we were searching for an agency or a partner to work with, I was very impressed by Superside's own branding and their own assets. And it gave me a sense of trust in their ability that I'd be able to have that one call and say, these are the 5 things I need. You know, here's what I can supply to you, copy, design, comments, etc. And then know that in 5 days, I'm going to get something that's viable and usable, and going to help us be a success.
Nice. Our marketing is actually working. Wow, cool. I hope my CEO is listening to this. And the last question maybe I'll ask, Tammy is asking, how do you make time that's clearly dedicated for being creative? I think she's asking a higher order question, not the output necessarily, but just this idea of general creativity and innovation. Is that something that you guys make deliberate time for or space for on your teams?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's intentional. You have to set time on your calendar, on other people's calendars, turn off the stuff, turn off the Slack, turn off your phone, turn off your texts, and actually be present and have time to be creative. And that could be in conversation. That can be exploring ideas outside of your current business. And that can be just connecting with other people in a creative manner. You have to make the time.
Yeah. And before ideation or brainstorming sessions, one thing I like doing is bringing our previous ads or previous creatives and playing a game of guess which one actually worked, this versus that. And then people see it's usually a coin flip. So everybody's more relaxed about their opinions.
That's such a good idea. So there's it's like low shoulders.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. The algorithms will decide. The robots are taking over.
Exactly. Just get the big things right.
Yeah.
One thing I'll add on that too is in this remote first world we live in now too, I feel like so many creative discussions would happen in person previously, and it would very organically. You would just meet, get in a meeting room, and suddenly discussions would start happening. So as Anisha said, it's important to be intentional about it now and make sure you are setting aside that time to have brainstorm collaborative sessions with your team.
Hey, I hope that session sparked some ideas and provided some excellent insight. If it did, join the Superside community. We've got plenty more videos and events to enjoy. Otherwise, visit superside.com to book a quick demo and find out more about what we do. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.